Hello, everybody. My name is Evan Robert Jones, and I am a PhD student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Before I start, I want to say a special thank you to our moderator, my fellow panelists, support staff, volunteers, friends, compatriots, and any and all of you taking the time or making the time to be here. In my case, it's a different here, and I do apologize for not being in Seattle, but I do appreciate you, and I hope you're doing well. Now on to the topic at hand. The paper I'm presenting, Buying Nuclear Time, addresses former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's September 3, 2017 statement following North Korea's sixth nuclear weapons test. I examine the statement from a rhetorical perspective, diving into the particulars of the language, the wording, and the structure of the official English translation, as well as some quirks and complications I found in the statement. I work with two theoretical touchstones here. First, I draw from Kenneth Burke's understanding of what ambiguity offers us as communicators. In the context of this statement, it fueled an expansive and interesting rendition of what Maurice Charland called constitutive rhetoric, albeit with some interesting variations when compared with Charland's conceptualization of the term. In the paper, I contend that, by way of constitutive rhetoric, Abe's statement gestures towards and creates a meta-alliance which could itself transform and shift to address threats in the future. So, as you could tell, since I like to speak slowly, I'm not planning on reciting a 30-page paper in 5 minutes. Instead, I'll give an overview of some major points of this close reading-based study. My general argument is, Abe, and most likely his communication team, performed deft, intriguing political maneuvers by using ambiguity to fuel an act of constitutive rhetoric. Here, potentialities and possibilities created by the text called an audience into being and tasked them with a mission to complete. First, some background. On September 3, 2017, Shinzo Abe released a brief statement criticizing North Korea for performing their sixth nuclear weapons test. Abe claimed North Korea also executed over 10 ballistic missile tests in that same year, which occurred despite the existence of UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea. I maintain Abe's September 3, 2017 statement counters North Korean provocation and executes communicative tasks which help Japan. This brief message defined Japan's position while obfuscating its diplomatic options on numerous fronts. I argue its strength rested in how it implied various courses of action and reaction as opposed to presenting painstaking delineations of them. In other words, its value emerged not from an ingrained, demanding directness, but by the well-measured use of ambiguity. In the paper, I talk about how Abe addressed multiple audiences while accomplishing 7 distinct tasks. These include establishing Japan as being on par with other countries in terms of international security, shifting a burden of disproof onto North Korea, creating an impression of overwhelming global solidarity, hiding the amount of resources and support available to Japan, inviting support by alternating between specific details and vague allusions, reassuring Japanese citizens of their government's competency, and elevating what can be seen as a Japanese issue into a global concern. Returning to theory, I'd like to talk about constitutive rhetoric a bit, a concept which uses Burkean identification, where one has to recognize the other to communicate, and an Althuserian interpolation, where we are hailed, and where we recognize ourselves as being addressed. This was delineated by Maurice Charland in 1987. For Charland, quote, audiences are constituted as subjects through a process of identification with a textual position. This happens via, quote, a series of ideological effects arising from the narrative structure of constitutive rhetoric. He describes 3 such important effects. The process of constituting a collective subject, which is based upon a Burke-like ultimate identification, the presentation of a transhistorical subject, which causes people to identify with a shared history or communal experience, and finally, an illusion of freedom, granted to constituted subjects, where freedom is, quote, illusory because the narrative is already spoken or written. Subjects must fulfill the narrative. This is non-negotiable. Constitutive rhetoric, quote, presents that which is most rhetorical, the existence of a people, or of a subject, as extra-rhetorical. The constituted audience members do exist before identifying with appeals to transform into a people. However, self-interpolation is integral to constitutive rhetoric's success. In other words, you gotta buy in. You have to be compelled. And as I've said, I argue that this resulted in the cultivation of a broad meta-alliance, one which includes Japan and allies both known and unknown, that could respond to future North Korean aggression and antagonism regardless of circumstantial change, as well as variations over time. Abe capitalized on Japan's connections with its allies while encouraging this buy's expansion. Yet, he also subverts some of the particulars of Charland's constitutive rhetorical theory. Japan may have been low on resources, options, and flexibility in terms of being able to confront the DPRK, but Abe's statement functioned to lessen the extreme hostility it faced. It shouldn't be viewed as a silver bullet which rectified all problems, and most certainly it did not, but as a communique which challenged a bellicose power, called upon allies, and helped decrease the inordinate pressure Japan contended with via call to action that invited other allies to join in the fold. The fact that its audiences and their narratives may change over time is part of the rhetorical charm. So, I'd like to stop here, and should you have any questions, wish to read the paper, or just want to talk about buildings or cargo container homes, please reach out to me at patlabor@live.unc.edu. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great conference. Thank you.